You're listening to Superpower Up with multidimensional master, superpower expert, and former counterintelligence agent, Tonya Dawn Recla. If you're ready to disrupt reality, then sit down, strap in, and prepare to experience the show that proves there is no spoon.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, your superpower expert. And this week, we're talking about normalizing superpowers. On last week's episode, I talked with Kristine Fredheim about normalizing spirituality. And if that's kind of your shtick and you know that you're here to kind of spread that message about us being spiritual beings and living a spiritual existence in this human world, then make sure you check that out. What I want to kind of narrow in here today is on the superpower concept, because it's such a kind of normalized concept. We get it, but where it's abstract is when we do the application into like actual supernatural abilities or spiritual gifts that we possess. And recorded throughout the eons of history are examples of miracles being performed, healings happening, extraordinary abilities exercised by seemingly humans. Whatever the case may be, they're peppered in our literature and our movies and very popularized here lately. And yet how do we use those for ourselves? Why would we have them? And are they a mutation? Are they what is it that we're talking about here? Are they even real? Like, is it even possible? And so those are some of the questions that come up in the superpower dialogue. And most people, if they're used to hearing about superpowers in the personal development or spiritual growth space, it's usually more kind of, as just an illustration, not so much as its own kind of it's a separate concept, but more like calling our the things that we're really good at, calling those a superpower. And by all means, that's totally acceptable. That's a strategy. That's not exactly the approach that we were downloaded here at Superpower Experts. It was very clear that we needed to start pulling up some of these abilities and highlighting them for people to help people start to see how energy works and the damage that it can cause and the amazing blessings that it can create, moving beyond the traditional five senses. And in order to do that, we have to have a construct for it. So when we talk about normalizing superpowers, we're talking about bringing to the forefront, what does it look like for our society if we accept that these are not only possible, but they're desirable? And what is the fallout or the ripple effect from that, both good and bad advantages, disadvantages, however we want to value things. So that's today's conversation. Before we cut off here to break, where I'm going to remind you that if this is your world and this is the stuff that really resonates with you, kudos on finding the broadcast, on finding the website. Go and check us out more, because this is not just entertainment. This is for those of you who feel the calling, and we are uniquely positioned to assist in that. Check out the programs. If you have a message that has to get out to the masses, you can check out our podcast network, the opportunities there. Regardless if you're feeling a sense that we're your tribe and we're speaking your language and, this just might be your jam, then reach out to us, experts@superpowerexperts.com, or you can fill out the contact form on the website. We're always happy to connect and see if we have solutions for you or find out if there are ways we can support you in your journey. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking today about normalizing superpowers, and when we come back, we're going to dive into those even more deeply. Stay with us, folks. Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, Executive Director of Superpower Experts, and we want to thank each of you for making Superpower Up the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. Because people like you have the courage to say that mindfulness, healthy living, disrupting reality, the pursuit of consciousness, responsible entrepreneurship, and radical parenting matter. We now amass over 1 million downloads monthly in more than 90 countries. Our numbers keep growing because there are far more people willing to live divergently than mass media wants to acknowledge. For you, the change makers, the light bearers, the way showers, we say thank you. If you're ready to take the next step in your evolution, go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the superpower quiz. And as Neva Lee Recla, our youngest podcaster, likes to remind us, remember, we all have superpowers and we can change the world. Perfect. This is Tonya Dawn Recla. You're listening to Disrupt Reality, and we're talking about normalizing superpowers. And before the break, I explained why some of this comes up for us, how the message was gifted to us, and it was positioned in the container of superpowers, and our marching orders were to create a really solid relationship between the superpower dialogue and personal development and spiritual growth. And so that's what we set about doing about 5 years ago now. I think the podcast is just over 4 years old. But anyway, the messaging in it was, it felt really foreign to me, and the superpower stuff wasn't something that was innate to my beingness, and I kind of fought against it, resisted it, brushed up against it, and was like, well, maybe we can do this with it, and it was very clearly meant to be this. And the body of work that's developed out of that's been channeled and synthesized and taught over and over and over and tested and all that stuff before we present it, of course, is, is beautiful and very deep and very intricate and integrated. It's like a modern mystery school combined with the top of the personal development stuff. It really does pick up where the personal development, spiritual growth journey leaves off. And picks people up right at the culmination of their own self-dominion to help move them then into their soul dominion so we can be in that collective soul space together. It's weird, right? It's weird to talk about superpowers in terms of an obligation, a responsibility, a byproduct of walking this world as the divine, and still on purpose, right? Needing to be utilized in some capacity. Well, where we got to, how we got here was that instead of starting with asking, well, should this be or shouldn't this be? We said, okay, if it is, then why? So if superpowers are real, why? Why might they be? What purpose could they serve? What would we need them for? Do we really want that? And really sitting with that level of responsibility before starting to build a construct is absolutely going to be required of all ventures moving forward as far as the divine is concerned. Years ago, the information that came through was that companies of the future were going to have to figure out how to stay ahead of technology and consciousness. Now it's not just that. It's not just staying ahead of it. You better be in alignment with it. And if you don't, and you don't know what that means, and you don't know how to combine those, you might want to start asking some questions and cracking some books, because it's a different world. We're seeing that all over the place right now. As uncertainties grow, we're going to have to figure out where we find our centers, and from our centers, we start to learn what's possible, way beyond what we ever dreamt was possible. Well, once we start playing in those spaces, the idea that superpowers really might not be that far-fetched becomes more and more plausible. So when we talk about superpowers, we started just asking, okay, what do we need to identify first? What are the things that are most challenging to people right now that are present, that we can help them work through the challenge, help them neutralize that, and help move it into an ability? Because the more people we can get online with these gifts, using them in a responsible, effective, accountable way, you know what that does, right? That has a ripple effect throughout the entirety of the multiverse that we can comprehend, the construct, the projection, and has an impact. We get to raise the frequency, and that then informs what we're capable of creating. It does start to develop the world that we all want to live in, one that is infused with, imbued with, threaded through with the divine. And that includes us and everyone around us. Well, the ones that came through started to organize themselves into category 1, category 2, and the planting of the seed for the suspected category 3s that are coming online. And it doesn't mean that more don't exist, or that higher levels don't exist, or whatever. That's just what came through our body of work. Like I've gotten so incredibly comfortable with standing in our gap and not pretending to know beyond it, but absolutely being the wisdom holder within it. And if you haven't gotten to that space in your work, I highly encourage it and opening yourself up to that idea, because it is the most liberating and most productive space I've ever experienced. But for whatever reason, this is what came through in our body of work. And in those category ones were things like mind reading, psychic ability, being an empath, all that fun stuff. But prior to that, we had to look at intuition, because you see that gets left out of a lot of the superpower conversations, but it's threaded throughout all of the comic book stories, all the superhero stories, is this idea, this sort of this actualization that has to occur. Well, part and parcel to that is the awareness of what you're in service to, which of course has to be built on top of an idea of who you are, which is predicated on what do you think we're doing here? What is here? What is this that we're doing, and how did we get here? So there's some elementary kind of precursors to being able to talk about superpowers that quite frankly surprised me. I didn't read the fine print or God's no slouch and didn't tell me the fine print, because I probably would have fought back even harder. And so you can imagine my surprise when I go to start teaching people about these superpowers that I've downloaded and how to use them and how I've been using them for eons, but didn't realize it. And lo and behold, there are specific containers that have to be built in order to utilize these agreements, growth phases that have to be accomplished, and surrenders that have to happen, and commitments that have to be reignited. And so that's the pickup where the personal growth and spiritual development kind of component leave off. We can look at the ones who know that they're here to have that impact and aren't real sure how to build in this more abstract space. And yet they know that what they've tried to do isn't working, and the other models that they've tried to take on don't work. They're wanting to know what's next. And that's where this model emerged out of. And they had to be willing to look at what are the abilities that I have that I'm predisposed to, and what challenges have they been presenting? How do I neutralize those and really open them up to the gifts that they are? Some of the category one folks, those who wield those have been using them, and just to a degree of success. Our Cat 2 people are confounded about why they keep trying things and they don't work. So our category 2 superpower folks, if you're really challenged in certain areas and you've got all the pieces in place, and you can't figure out why things just don't cohere for you, you may want to reach out to us and do, and look into the program and see if that would be a good fit for you. We can help you with that. So at the end of the day, what are we really talking about when we get to the normalizing superpower space? And as the ideas came online and the body of work started to develop, I started asking some pretty critical questions, and some of them were around: do we want this? What happens if we help people develop these abilities? And of course, my mind goes to, well, if you've got superheroes, then you need supervillains, right? And perhaps that is true, or perhaps the heroes are in response to the villains. We could chicken egg this all day long. And I wasn't real comfortable. My personhood wasn't real comfortable with those odds, right? It really was kind of a crapshoot. And I was like, maybe we should leave well enough alone. But the response that I received was pretty telling about why this is so important. And truthfully, you can't really use superpowers with any degree of reliability and effectiveness until you have done the developmental work to be able to turn yourself, your life, your existence over to the greater good, to be of service to that. And that's ultimately what every superhero comes to, right? You've got to be willing to be, to sacrifice the ego, the personhood, to die off to that self, in order to reemerge as one of the whole, but a whole aspect of the whole. And that's where I think people get tripped up in the premature collaboration stuff, which by the way was an article I wrote. Do you suffer from premature collaboration? And we try to move into that space without first being able to hold our own completely. And part of that process is understanding what your predisposed superpowers are and how do you go about moving those from being challenging to being a gift, and what are you in service to, looking at that really complicated puzzle and making sure that you're in alignment with it. That's when everything just kind of settles in and you get to that space I was speaking to, which is incredibly freeing, but you build so rapidly there. It is what we've all been working toward, what we're all waiting for. How do you do that? You can go to our app, SuperpowerNet, anywhere where you get apps. You can go to superpowernet.com and take the quiz. There's links off of our site, of course, superpowerexperts.com. Just kind of walk through it or go to the programs page and take the readiness assessment. That's a great way to start walking into our ecosystem. Of course, we have filtration processes, make sure that people are a good fit. Because this is absolutely not designed for everybody. We have a very specific market, and those of you who are it know that, because it's always a solid yes. You can feel it. And those of you who think you might be it, but might be a little afraid to admit it to yourself, you're probably there too. And then, but for some of you, you don't have any idea what I'm talking about right now, and that's fine too. Play within our space as much as you want to. Listen to our shows. Just listening to our shows attunes you to a new level of possibility. And listen to a podcast a day, and that helps. And if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. And that's perfect and beautiful, and you're walking your path. Folks, we appreciate your loyalty. I know there's a lot going on for a lot of you in the world, and we know that you're still listening, and some of you are listening even more fervently right now. And just know that we see the light. We know the peace that passes understanding, and sometimes being in the misunderstanding is one of the most challenging spaces to be in. Find your center through prayer, through meditation, through a walk in nature, whatever you can do through just being with a loved one. Find that center, allow yourself to connect and be vulnerable in that, and the fear starts to look a little bit more manageable, okay? Lots of energies going on. For those of you who have chameleon ability and energetic manipulation, you're feeling it. Those empaths, I know you're sensing it as well. And the mind readers out there, be careful with those thoughts. Make sure you know whose thoughts you're thinking, okay? Lots of techniques to utilize during this time, but the easiest one, and what I want you to work on this week, is just to expand out, get really big, let that energy get really, really expansive, okay? And that's going to help. Just remember, you are so much bigger than you think you are. All right, all of you, stay safe and healthy. We love you. And until next time, go out, uncover your superpowers, and change the world. Take care, everyone.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the superpower quiz today.